Hello and welcome to Insert Coin and Let's Talk. Today's guest is Urmas Paet, former Estonian Foreign Affairs Minister, one of the longest standing Foreign Affairs Minister. He is a global political actor and today is a member of the European Parliament. Good afternoon, Urmas, and welcome.
Hello, hello.
So, no one expected the Spanish Inquisition and the coronavirus as well. How do you think that the European Union is acting to face this crisis?
Well, there are different stages. First, I guess European Union and European Commission were very slow. And unfortunately, we saw where all European Union countries acted themselves. They closed rapidly borders. They didn't, or most of them didn't consult or discuss it even with neighbors. So that the first phase of this crisis in Europe was quite sporadic, so that I didn't really see the leadership of the European Union or European Commission. Now I feel it's much better in this sense that there is more and more also assistance from other countries to the, countries of the EU which have the most difficult situation, be it Italy, be it Spain, be it some other countries. Plus, of course, now the discussions about the economic and financial support to the European countries. So that here, of course, it's also important that the leaders of EU member states and leaders of the European institutions manage, rather soon to get a final agreement. How it will look like, I see that it is very practical and pragmatic, that the important tools will be also in the frame of the upcoming financial framework and in the frame of new EU budget. So that I think that it is really practical, but of course, as always, the devil is in the details. So that I hope that all these details also will be fixed pretty soon.
Don't you think that we, the European Union, have, also we have a different structure, but nevertheless, there should be a different political commitment in the eyes of such crisis. If we look to the United States, in the space of a few weeks, they were able to approve, I don't know, by now, 5.5 trillion US dollars in different stimulus packages. Do you think that we should be more committed and react with a more practical attitude regarding such a singular crisis that we are facing? Because I see a lot of EU citizens in different EU member states complaining the lack of a joint and a committed strategy from the European Council.
Well, of course, during this kind of crisis, there are two very important elements. One is the speed of also decision making, and second is communication. So that, we have seen, as I said, during this crisis in the European Union, different stages or different levels. First, EU was too slow, but now I guess it's more or less functional. But anyway, it continues to be important that also what concerns financial and economic decisions, that speed matters. And second element is communication. So that, I see here and there that in some parts of Italy or in some other countries, they say that, you see China or Russia, they are helping us, but what is EU doing? Although the facts are that, of course, the biggest supporter for these countries are other European Union countries, not China, not Russia, but other EU countries. So that in this regard, this kind of adequate and also quick communication about what is going on, also what concerns the assistance, what concerns the decisions already made, it is crucial during crisis time. Otherwise, of course, all this disinformation or even lies, they will get good ground, and then the damage also for public relations, damage for public support for the EU activities, of course, will be problematic if we miss this opportunity to also share and spread adequate information what Europe and European countries and European institutions actually are doing.
So you believe that we are reaching a point where our ambition is a positive one, that the tools are being aligned to deliver this ambition, to address this ambition. But in terms of communication, well, we have still a long way to go. And this has been, and now we are entering a topic that is propaganda that we've been facing already for many years.
But if I may, then of course, one crucial element is also the lessons learned part. So that also, I guess, for surprise for many people here in Europe was the situation that there was not enough, for example, all these protection masks and other equipment. But if we looked at Europe's economy and the size of Europe's economy, so that it is actually, well, quite problematic that Europe is dependent in Chinese stuff in this regard. So that I guess one of the lessons learned also should be that for this kind of strategic reserves, for different type of crises, Europe should be able to deliver what we need here and not be dependent on China or any other third country.
No, well, our viewers don't know, but we had already the privilege to work. We worked for many years together, and I remember one of the topics that we had the opportunity even to set a few conferences with the support of other members of the Renew Europe group, Hilde Vodmans, among others, was CBRN threats, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear threats.
Yes.
So, I remember that we did an assessment on the preparedness of the EU when compared with the United States and Japan and other countries, and we were really behind. And this is a biological quasi-warfare that we are facing, and you're right, we missed a lot of the necessary tools to address such an emergency. But there is a standing emergency that we are not as well addressing for a long time, and our capacity and our investment to counter this standing propaganda coming from China and Russia is again a huge liability for our project, for the support for our European project, but also for our national and European security. How do you address today a commitment from the EU as a whole regarding the increasing and more toxic levels of propaganda coming from these two political actors?
Well, first, I guess we here in Europe simply have to be strong and professional. In this regard, that the first element should be that also our own European messages go through. So that it's, of course, easy to blame China or Russia or whoever for their own propaganda. But I guess the first element has to be that our own channels of communication to reach people in Europe should be efficient enough. Second element is, of course, the professionalism also of journalism. So that in this regard, well, professional journalists actually are more or less the only ones in our societies who also, well, can tell the truth about the intention of, for example, so-called Chinese help and what's really behind and so on. And then, of course, the third element is, yes, to point attention where the Stratcom or other, well, organizations in Europe can see that there is false information, that there are lies, and then to point attention to this kind of stuff, and then also to give adequate balance that what is wrong and what is right. So that in this regard, of course, we see also, unfortunately, now during this crisis sort of propaganda war. So that I will not be surprised that if now this crisis is over, and then we will see in most of European countries, once again, the new strong wave from China what concerns 5G applications on the basis of so-called well, activities now during the period of crisis that, well, they showed to Europe goodwill, they sent assistance, they did this and that. And now when the crisis is over, it's again good time to come once again in with all these 5G applications. So in this sense, for me, it looks quite obvious that it will be now the immediate next step for this, what we have seen now during this crisis here in Europe. But again, the most important is how professionally can work European institutions, our member states, to deliver the adequate information, what actually we are doing. And then secondly, of course, to professional journalism. So that's why I also see that now as one of the outcomes of this crisis, of course, is also that professional journalism or media organizations also will be economically weaker. And that's why, well, I also made one of the proposals that the European Commission, preparing now the new package for economic support. I guess we also have to put our attention how to support media organizations, so that professional media organizations in Europe will be not weaker after this crisis. Because if it happens, then of course there will be more free space for fake news, for propaganda, for whatever. So that in this sense, it's also important to give our support to professional media organizations.
Yeah, even this week, a Czech media group, if I'm not mistaken, was already bought by a Chinese company. So once again, we failed to apply our foreign investment scrutiny tool in place to counter these takeovers that jeopardize also our freedom of press and freedom of speech. They constrain. But it's not only propaganda that we are facing today. We are facing that a country like China, for instance, and now let's talk a bit more about China, has the ability to, in a very easy way and with a checkbook, enter and start to constrain and to reshape the narrative in organizations as the United Nations or the WHO. And on the latter, we've been facing a tremendous political pressure over how the World Health Organization managed and communicated the present pandemic crisis to the world, and how apparently and allegedly defended a bit the China position in all of this. And as a collateral, we also saw that one of the most outstanding countries managing the present pandemic, Taiwan, was basically sidelined by the WHO up to a point that they could not resist more the international community pressure. How do you assess the need to reform such international organizations in a way to make them more transparent and to generate a shield that can protect them in terms of their operational capacity from the political pressure from different countries?
Well, again, it's about lessons learned. And I hope that one of these lessons also for European societies will be, once again, to remind that if we, for example, compare European societies with Chinese society, then it is completely different. European societies are open democracies. Chinese society is authoritarian regime with no free flow of information, with no free press and so on. So that this is very fundamental. Second important element, what concerns organizations like WHO, then of course, it's very bad to see that, for example, already last December, when Taiwan sent information to WHO about this new virus and that this new virus is really dangerous and so on, then what WHO did? Well, they didn't anything. So that they put this information away and didn't inform other member states of WHO. And they did not do this because of they were afraid of China. So that I guess to change this kind of situation, be it WHO or some other organizations, then of course, first again, it's very much also about the management and the leadership of this organization. And second, also European Union can do much more. Also, this concrete case with Taiwan and WHO, I would like to see that European Union member states will be very clear addressing WHO and other members that Taiwan should get at least observer status in this organization, so that they actually can participate in professional meetings, that they can deliver their analysis and information and also get it. And all this will be also spread all around the world, because now just recently we saw how high is the cost for other nations, also for European nations, if WHO is making politics and not delivering adequate health information, which unfortunately wasn't the case with this Taiwanese information. So that, of course, it is, we may say, politically complicated, but again, I guess European Union is strong enough also globally that we also can have our own say, be it in WHO or other organizations, how we'd like to see that the things will develop so that our societies, our people will not suffer as a result of this kind of political games, as we unfortunately have just recently seen.
Yes, no, you are completely right. Another thing that we've been witnessing in the last 2 months, basically since the lockdown started worldwide, is the tremendous increase of cyber attacks, always posing a huge problem and huge challenge to our cyber defense capabilities. Do you think that the progress that we've been doing, the investments we have been doing in the European Union, they match the threat, or we still have some way to go?
Well, actually, I have concerns now related to the same coronavirus developments, because first, what concerns all the picture of sharing information, then we see that all press is full, which is understandable, but it is full only the information what concerns coronavirus. And of course, this is a very convenient moment for all of those who actually want to do something bad in this shadow, because there is simply not enough attention to something else than only coronavirus. And other element is also about the budget and about the plans of the European Union for the future. So that, again, of course, the big concentration of this discussions, and most probably also the new budget, will be for this to balance the impact, the economic impact and financial impact of this virus. But at the same time, there are also other plans and developments which should still remain also in this new financial framework. One is European Defence Union, including also cyber defense, including some other important elements which have direct relation to our security of Europe. So that, yes, this year, so far, unfortunately, we have had this pandemic, this health crisis, but nobody knows what kind of crisis will be next. So that I think that also now, when we're discussing and preparing once again this new financial framework, we should not underestimate the possibility of whatever other security risks of possible crises in the future. So that's why I guess it's also important not to forget about all other already started developments and plans which should increase European security, including, of course, also the ability for in the field of cyber defense and also, well, offense if it's needed.
Well, a last question. What is your prediction to start be able to fly? You are our viewers don't know, but you love to fly. You love planes, and it's always an interesting topic of conversation between us. When do you think that we will be able to fly again in Europe and in the world? How long do you think this lockdown will ground the fleets of the different airliners?
I guess in Europe it depends, of course, as practical steps. It depends very much on this when European countries will lift the travel bans and reopen the borders and also let foreigners enter into the country. So I guess this is the most important thing. And of course, as we all understand, it also depends then on the balance point. Balance point on the one hand between the combat against coronavirus, but on the other side, the impact of this lockdown for the health of people in other sense. There are lots of other also possible problems for people caused by this lockdown, plus of course economic impact as well. So that in final end, it depends on this balance point and the decision of European countries when then they start to open the borders again and let foreigners to enter. It looks at the moment that it may be the issue of, well, upcoming weeks, but of course, even after this lockdown is over, it takes time for air companies to increase the capacity again. It depends again how much people actually want to fly, what kind of plans they do for summer, for holidays. So that of course it will be difficult. And I agree with the analysis that it will actually take months and months or even a year or two.
Yeah, the situation is extremely constrained. Today, Lufthansa announced that they are running out of money.
Yes, it is in this sense, of course, problem for all air companies and all the sector of tourism, also hotels, restaurants, whatever. So that at this stage, of course, very much also will depend what kind of supporting mechanisms there will be from the member states, but also from the European Union.
Well, the time is over for our talk. A last question. Would you recommend a book to our viewers to read during this period, or a movie that you would like to recommend?
It is really a bit surprise that I should give this kind of recommendation. But well, I will not give in this sense concrete hint, because there are so many beautiful literature and beautiful films in Europe. But I guess that maybe it's now time to concentrate a little bit more on, well, European arts. There are lots of very nice European film production, including Estonian one. And it also concerns literature, so that we all used to, well, see and read famous writers from different, mainly big countries of Europe. But maybe it's now time to look a bit deeper and to see that something original from smaller European languages and smaller European cultures.
And listen to one of the most amazing composers in the world that comes from your country.
Yes, if I would, be very, how to say, Estonian culture oriented, then of course the music of Urmas Paet is beautiful always, but also during these difficult times. And also one Estonian author, when we speak about the literature, Jaan Kross. His books, they also have been translated in many European languages, so that my recommendation will be look at Jaan Kross and his masterpieces.
Urmas Paet, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you very much and all the best.